The desire for a homeland, of course, is universal. The Kurds want a homeland. I believe they deserve a homeland, as do the Chechens, the Tibetans. And the Jews, they wanted a homeland, they got a homeland. The Moroccans, the Japanese, the Nigerians, the Dominicans, they all have homelands. And unlike us, I think they have no plans to relinquish their homeland. It's only, of course, when whites express the desire for a homeland that we are considered somehow hostile to all others. And when we take the slightest opportunity, the slightest efforts to talk in terms of preserving our homelands, we are considered haters. Not, of course, that we have very many opportunities even to talk about our homelands. The legitimate interests of whites, I believe, in the United Kingdom as in the United States, are really a conceptual vacuum. That's not a concept that is even allowed in the United States. And just how rare this concept is was brought home to me just the other day when I had a conversation with a Korean American. He must have been, 36, 37 years old. And the conversation turned to immigration. And I said to him that I opposed this process that was reducing my people to a minority. Well, this seemed perplexing. I said to him, well, how would you like it if Europeans or white Americans were pouring into Korea and were in the process of reducing your people to a minority? Or even better, imagine Mexicans and Haitians were doing this and reducing you to a minority. He says, well, I wouldn't like that. I said, well, then perhaps you can imagine why whites are not keen on turning our country over to foreigners. But he was silent for a moment, and he said, I never thought about that. It had never crossed his mind. But I must say, he was staggered by the idea. It really gave him, he didn't know what to make of this idea. But here's this fellow, he'd come to the United States when he was a young boy. He'd gone to school in America. He had a good job, he was a lawyer. And it had never occurred to him, that whites might not want to give away their country. Why not? Why hadn't it ever occurred to him? I think undoubtedly it's because all his life he had heard white people saying that we whites, we probably couldn't even get up in the morning and put our pants on if it weren't for the diversity that wonderful people like him were supplying. So why should it have ever occurred to him that there were people that thought the way I did? But to his credit, I must say, when the prospect was put to him in terms of a parallel between his country, well, although he was an American citizen, of course, between his country of origin and the United States, he seemed to realize that, well, yes, the United States is a nation with a people. I suppose all his life he just thought of it as a place that was up for grabs, first come, first served. But when I drew that parallel, to his credit, he understood immediately what I was talking about. But as I say, this concept does not exist in America. He had never heard it. I've had conversations of this kind with, I guess, 3 other non-whites when I think about it. One was a fellow named Roberto Suro. He is a Hispanic. He's a big bug at something called the Brookings Institution, a mainstream organization. He is a director of the Pew Hispanic Center, another entirely mainstream organization. And he gave a talk at yet another mainstream organization called the American Enterprise Institute, in which I was no audience. And he was talking happily about how Hispanics are increasing in numbers. Their influence is growing. They are everywhere. They are leaving their mark on every aspect of America. All true. Well, I asked a question from the audience. I said, I can understand that you're happy about this, but I, as a white American, a representative of the founding stock, I'm not happy. Why is it all right for you to celebrate your growing influence, but wrong for me to oppose this? Why is it wrong for me to wish things were going the other way? But he didn't even answer the question. He just moved on. Well, I had a copy of his book. It's a very interesting book called Strangers Among Us, about Hispanic immigration to the United States. And I took it up to him after his talk, and I asked him to sign it. Well, for the first time in my life, an author refused to sign it. He turned his back on me, walked away. Well, I suppose he could get away with that because never in his life had anyone asked him, why is his celebration of his growing influence okay, but why is it wrong for me to oppose or regret that? Well, I had a similar conversation with a fellow named Terrence Samuel. He's now a journalist with the Washington Post. And I asked him basically the same question. Why is it all right? Why is it good, healthy ethnic pride when they celebrate their growing numbers, but why should we celebrate our dwindling numbers? What's in it for us? Well, I'll never forget his answer. He said, I don't know. I can't think of the reason right now, but I know it's wrong. Well, at least he admitted he was stumped. But I think he was probably, he might have been able to come up with a reason if he'd given a chance to think about it. He'd never thought about it. Once again, the idea that whites have legitimate interests as a group, it had never apparently occurred to him. Now, the only other black person with whom I ever had a discussion of this kind, he was an out-and-out black separatist. Basically, he hated white people, but he liked me. And so I won't embarrass him by mentioning his name in public. I think his colleagues would look down on him for the friendly relations he had with me. But we had a number of long talks about many things. And once, when we were talking about immigration, he raised the question. He said, by the way, I'm all for it, but why are white people committing suicide? Well, this time I was the one who was stumped. But here was a man who had thought about race, who thinks in terms of his own race, who could see what white people are doing. Most whites, of course, have absolutely no idea.